Hey pals, I'm here today to talk to you about every unread book I own that I haven't read yet. Now, if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you will know that I used to have a really big TBR shelf, a really big stack of unread books. At highest, it got to around 270, and I just realised that was something I wasn't happy with. I didn't like having a lot of unread books, and I really wanted to try and reduce that. My aim was to reduce it to 50 unread books, but I wanted them to be books that hadn't been sort of lingering unread for a long time. So I wanted a book to not really sit in my house unread for longer than a year. And currently I have 29 unread books, and the vast majority of them I have only had for up to 2 years. And I have only one that I've had for longer than 2 years. So it's a lot better than it used to be. The reason I don't have more than that, because I initially said my number that I was comfortable with was 50, is because I am an avid user of the library now. I visit at least once a week. I log into my library app at least once a day. And I know when I had a really busy day, because it will get to like 5 o'clock and I'll be like, oh my God, I haven't logged into the library app today. So yeah, I always have 20 books borrowed because that's my library's limit. And I always have loads of books on hold. And I tend to prioritise my library reading because I read a lot of new releases, a lot of front list. So other people are in the queue, so I have to return them within 3 weeks. So yeah, I end up prioritising my library reading and not prioritising my own books on my shelves. And that concerns me for a couple of reasons. Number one, like, why buy books if I'm not going to read them quite soon? That's how I view it, and that isn't a comment on how anyone else enjoys their reading. And secondly, the books I tend to buy tend to be ones I'm more sure I'll love. So it's almost like I'm ignoring the ones I think I have the most chance of loving. So let's crack on. I'm going to talk about these, starting with the oldest book on my shelf, coming up to the ones I've hauled recently. So the first one is the only one that I've had for longer than 2 years, and that is Care Work, Dreaming Disability Justice by Leah Lakshmi Piepzna Samarashina. I've had this for about 4 years, so it's the only book that has survived without being unhauled that I haven't read for this long. And that is because it is a collection of essays about disability justice and sort of the care we can provide for one another as a community. And I've heard amazing things about it. And the reason I haven't read it is because format-wise, it is sort of a mixture of essays and interviews. It kind of looks quite different. And so I've been like a tiny bit, I guess, intimidated by it, and I've always felt like I need to be in a more sort of intelligent or academic mindset when I read it, and that's why I haven't picked it up. And I tend to let non-fiction linger longer on my shelves because I always think I need to be concentrating more when I read it, which is probably silly. But I'm sure a few of you have read this and loved it, so I would love your encouragement to pick this one up. Now, these next four, I think, I got in the 2022 Christmas hardback half-price sale at Waterstones. The first one is At Certain Points We Touch by Lauren John Joseph. I haven't had many people talk about this, but the few people I have had talk about it have absolutely loved it. And a couple of my patrons who have quite similar taste to me really raved about this one. So it's really silly that it's lingered. I think these four have lingered because if I buy books in bulk like this, I tend to get to half of them and then the other half I don't read. So I try not to do that as much anymore, but it does inevitably happen. So Tori Peters says that Lauren John Joseph writes with such wit, glamour and style. I haven't read a book that so powerfully evokes what it's like to be a wild young artist among other wild young artists in the bright young things. So my understanding of this is it is somebody looking back on a sort of doomed relationship from 10 years previously, and they're looking back on this partnership and what this person meant in their life. And it is set across London, San Francisco and New York. It says it is a riotous, razor-sharp coming-of-age story that marks the arrival of an extraordinary new talent. And I'm pretty sure this is a kind of toxic relationship, and I believe it's a queer one as well. So yeah, I've heard really interesting things about this one, and I don't know why I haven't picked it up, because I feel like it's one I could like really inhale and want to just speed through. This next one, I 100% know why I haven't picked it up, but I shouldn't have bought it if I didn't think I was going to want to read it. And that is Woman of Light by Callie Fajardo Anstein. So this is frustrating. I loved this author's short story collection, Sabrina and Karina. I'd highly recommend it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So as soon as I heard she had a new book out and it was a novel, I was super excited. Then I realised that this book does a couple of things that I don't love. It's a family drama, which I love, focuses on women, which is something I absolutely adore, and it has multiple perspectives, which I also love. But this is a multi-generational family saga. Now, I don't love that because I feel a lot of the time when we're following multiple generations, like each within their own time frame, I don't love when books like jump through years in like a paragraph, because I think that kind of holds you at a distance. That's one concern I have. The other concern I have is that this says it's a Western, which is something I like super don't enjoy. I do not like historical Westerns, and I don't know if it's because as a child we watched loads of Western films. My mum and dad really loved them, and yeah, like the type of Western films that we would have been watching around then were, you know, had a lot of harmful stereotypes, and yeah, didn't love them. And I don't know if that's just kind of left like a bad taste in my mouth, I don't know. But my other problem with this is that this hasn't got the most positive reviews out there. A lot of people went into this excited because of our short story collection and then felt kind of disappointed and said it was a little bit muddled. So yeah, so I haven't picked it up, but it's really silly because I've read something else from this author that I adored, and you know, why buy it if I'm not going to give it a go? So I'd love to hear if you've read this one, especially if you enjoyed it, and try and convince me to give this one a go. This next one I have no excuse, it makes no sense why I haven't read this, and that is Rainbow Rainbow by Lydia Conklin. It's probably because I've been really bad at picking up short story collections in the last couple of years, and this is a short story collection. But I absolutely love the sound of this one. This is, there's cat fur all over these books, a collection of stories that celebrate the humour, darkness and depth of emotion of the queer and trans experience from a new voice that is certain to belong in the canon of contemporary queer literature. The stories sound amazing. It says that a non-binary writer on the eve of top surgery enters into a risky affair during the height of COVID. A lesbian couple enlists a close friend as a sperm donor, plying him with a potent rainbow-coloured cocktail. A lonely office worker struggling with their gender identity chaperones their nephew to a trans YouTube convention. And in the depths of a Midwestern winter, a sex-addicted librarian relies on her pet ferrets to help resist a relapse at a wild college fair. These sound like they're going to be a bit more humorous than the type of stories I usually read, but yeah, this has got absolutely great reviews. All the blurbs on the back are like so positive. So yeah, only reason I haven't read this is because I'm bad at reading short stories. I'm trying to change that this month. So I would love to know if you've read this one. This next one is a bit of an odd one for me, a bit of an outlier, and that's why I haven't read it. When I was at Waterstones for this half-price hardback sale, I thought, oh, I'll have a little look in the fantasy. And a book I'd been intrigued by is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. I haven't read any of her books, and part of me feels like they just won't be for me, but I had listened to the first 15 minutes of this on audio and felt quite pulled in. I felt like it was quite atmospheric. This is set at an all-girls boarding school, and this young girl is summoned to her uncle's estate because she's inherited it, but there's like weird gothic stuff going on there. And yeah, in general, I don't love this type of book. I think it's probably going to be quite fast-paced and yeah, not really my vibe, but I felt really in the mood for it, and I feel like I could like speed through it and have a lot of fun reading it. But yet it has sat unread for over 2 years. This next one I have fixed, and I will be reading this in July because it is our book club pick for Patreon, and that is The Curse of Challan by Lois McMaster-Bujold. This is the first book in, I think, a 6 or 7 book epic fantasy series. I've heard great things about this author. She does quite a lot of sort of interlinked fantasy series, and she also writes some sci-fi. I actually read the first 30 or 40 pages of this probably about a year ago, and really liked them, but then just, I don't know, got caught up probably reading library books and put it back on my shelf. So yeah, I need to give this one a go. From what I've heard, she writes really beautifully, quite slow pace, a lot of character development, and she gets comparisons to Robin Hobb, who is my favourite fantasy author. So yeah, I really want to get stuck into another sort of epic fantasy world, and yeah, I put this up against, I think, a fantasy or sci-fi book, I can't remember, and this one won. So I'm really glad to have the push, and I always think genre fiction is really good for a book club because it's fun to kind of like guess what you think is going to happen. So yeah, hopefully we'll end up really enjoying this one. And I have another couple of fantasy books, and this is a little mass market paperback that somehow got like damaged on the bottom. That would have been my fault. And that is Fires of the Faithful by Naomi Kritzer. This, I think, is supposed to be a kind of low stakes, cozy type fantasy set at a magical music conservatory. And about this young woman, and then there's a kidnap, and she's trying to uncover this plot. And yeah, I don't know why I haven't read it. I have read the first couple of pages, and there was quite a lot of names, like different girls being discussed, and it just felt like quite a lot when I gave it a go that one time. And sometimes that's all it takes. Like for me to read the first couple of pages when I'm trying to decide what to read, decide this isn't the one that wins today, and then that kind of like puts me off picking it back up for a while. Does anyone else do that? So yeah, I really feel like I could enjoy this, and like it could be really cozy, and then I could read more of her books, which will be exciting. So yeah, let me know if you've read this one. Then I have quite an old book, but in a new edition. This is the centenary edition, and that is The Eagle of the Ninth by Rosemary Sutcliffe. I've heard really good things about this author's work, and this book came out when young adult fantasy wasn't really a genre, but this is kind of like young adult fantasy. And it says it's a rollicking good adventure, and it's about the 9th Legion who marched into the midst of northern Britain and were never seen again. And we're following one young boy whose father was part of the 9th Legion, and he goes on this epic quest to try and find him. So there's a chance that this will be absolutely great and super cozy and atmospheric. There's also a chance that it could be really bad, because I've tried some books like older style fantasy for this kind of 9 to 12 age category, and found that the writing style is so straightforward and simple that I just can't bear it. So I'm hoping this isn't that. Again, let me know if you read this one. Then I have Post-Traumatic by Chantel V. Johnson. I have read the first chapter of this book twice and really loved it both times, and then decided to like give this a pass. I think maybe the title, and I've heard that there's quite a lot of trigger warnings with this book. I've always felt like I kind of need to be fairly strong when I pick this one up, and maybe I haven't felt like that when I gave it a go. But this is about a woman who is, to the outside observer, a success story. She's a dedicated lawyer who advocates for mentally ill patients at a psychiatric hospital. But for years she has been self-medicating with a mix of dating, dieting, dark humour and smoking weed with her best friend Jane. Then there's a family reunion that may like cause her to have this sort of mental health crisis, I think. So this is about a lot of childhood trauma and her trying to work through that. And yeah, the introduction is about her being at this hospital on one of the mental health wards, and I think one of the patients like gets hold of a knife or something and she has to intervene. And yeah, it was really shocking, but also written in a kind of really dry, funny way, which I really appreciated. So yeah, I feel like I could really love this. I think I just need to go in with a bit less fear. So again, have you read this one? So now we're on to the ones that I've had for less than a year, because all of these books I picked up since September 2023 onwards. So yeah, I am doing much better with these ones. And I remember that because I picked this up when I was on holiday in Edinburgh in September, and that is Attention Seekers by Emma Brankin. We were in an indie bookshop and Johnny saw this on one of the tables and obviously picked it up because it has a cat on the cover. And I read the first couple of paragraphs, really enjoyed the writing, thought it was really humorous. It's about the fact that this cat has more Instagram followers than this young woman, and she's like really angry about it. And then yeah, I read the back and thought it just sounded really interesting. It says it's about a group of characters who struggle with the lure of the limelight. A teenager escapes school gossip to hang out with a dead Tudor queen. A reality show applicant has a bitter axe to grind. A spiralling woman weaponises her cat's internet fame to keep track of her ex. And a guest has a mute meltdown while reluctantly attending a silent retreat. Like, when I read that blurb, I'm just annoyed with myself that I haven't read it, and I've had it since September, because it sounds great. And this one has so few reviews, so if it is a good book, I'd love to rave about it and encourage more people to read it. So yeah, do need to prioritise this one. Then we have a couple of books that I mentioned recently because I put them on my June TBR, so hopefully they won't be on my unread shelf for that much longer. The first one is Sleeping Alone by Rue Freeman. This is a collection of short stories. Sounds amazing. Again, I haven't heard many people talk about it, but the reviews I have seen for it are super positive, and all of the stories sound really interesting, and it just sounds like a collection I could really, really love. Then we have an essay collection. It's sort of like a memoir in personal essays by Melissa Febos, and that is Abandon Me. A couple of years ago, I read her memoir essay collection, Girlhood, and loved it. It was one of my favourite reads of the year. So I then wanted to go back and read her previous books, this being one of them. So it's really stupid that this has been sitting on my shelves for quite a few months, because I know I will probably give this book 5 stars. Sometimes books that I think I'll give 5 stars just tend to linger because I'm confident that I'll enjoy it when I get to it. So like, there's no rush. That's really stupid, there is a rush. So yeah, I would like to read this in the next week before the end of June. Then these next two I picked up earlier this year because I'm trying to read 20 books that made BookTuber's favourite books of the year in 2023. I'll link that video above. And these two were a couple that I couldn't get from my library, so I picked up copies of, and I still haven't read them. And these were both books that made Jen Campbell's favourite reads of 2023. First one is another short story collection called Watching Women and Girls by Danielle Pender. as soon as I saw this cover and title, I really wanted to pick this one up and then sort of forgot about it. And then when I heard Jen rave about it, I immediately wanted to give it a go. I mean, the title pretty much explains what this collection is about, and I love reading stories about women and girls, so I don't know why I haven't read this one. And then the next one is Ordinary Wonder Tales by Emily Urquhart. This is an essay collection, and perhaps I shouldn't really be including this because I have actually read the first 2 or 3 essays and sadly didn't really vibe with them. So I put this down. I think I picked it up in February and I put it down, and I've been meaning to get to it since then. And so yeah, this perhaps shouldn't be here because it is effectively like currently reading, but I do need to carry on because I do wonder if it was just like the mood I was in. This is an essay collection that kind of blends the idea of like magic and folklore and fairy tale and how that can sort of be part of the everyday. So I love the sound of it, but I didn't love those first couple of essays that I read. This next one my therapist recommended and I haven't yet picked it up, even though I've had it for probably at least 6 months. And I guess the reason I haven't picked this one up is because I think this is kind of a book you're supposed to treat almost like as a workbook and work your way through. And that sometimes feels like work, and I don't read for work. So yeah, I haven't picked it up yet, but I have heard amazing things about it, and my therapist, like I said, recommended it in particular to me and thought I'd get a lot out of it. And that is The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love by Sonia Renee Taylor. If you're not aware, I have a condition called functional neurological disorder, which means I live with a kind of constant amount of pain in my life, and it sort of ebbs and flows. And yeah, it can be very frustrating and it can make you very annoyed with your own body. And so yeah, she recommended this to me as a tool to help with my feelings around that. And again, I've heard really amazing things about this one. So yeah, have you read this one? What did you think? Then my mum doesn't often dare buy me books for Christmas because she knows, like, you know, I could already have them. But she was pretty sure I didn't have Haven by Emma Donoghue. We've both read a couple of Emma Donoghue books and really enjoyed them. And I'd mentioned that I wanted to carry on reading her other books. And this was one of the ones probably the next one I wanted to give a go, because I just think this sounds like a book I could really love, because this is set in 7th century Ireland. And it is about a priest who travels with 2 monks to find an isolated spot, I think, on an island, and they claim it for God and make this kind of haven. And it is about their lives there. Now, I love stories about like druids and monks in the olden times, and I love stories where people are in isolated locations, and also, you know, when books are set in a historical context and people are trying to kind of like live off the land, and you know, they live somewhere they can't get deliveries. I think that is really interesting, and yeah, I really love her writing style, and so I think I could really love this one. Why haven't I read it yet? I don't know. Then these next 2 are books that I picked up in, I think, January or February, and they are from authors who I've read other books from and loved, and so I'm trying to like read the whole backlist. The first one is The Words of Every Song by Liz Moore. I'm pretty sure this was her first novel, and it isn't very well known, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, it was published by a really small publisher, and then after that she moved to a different publisher and published her most recent novels, of which there are 3, but will be a 4th in the first week of July. And the other thing is that this is a novel told through short stories. So I think a lot of people are a bit wary of books like that. I enjoy that type of book. And I think this is kind of like linked to her experience in the music industry, which is, I think, the industry she worked in before she became a writer. Because it says, in the form of 14 linked episodes, each centred on a character involved with the music industry in some fashion. There's the arrogantly hip 26-year-old A&R man, the rising young singer-songwriter, the established arena-filling rock star on the verge of a midlife crisis, and the type A female executive with the heavy social calendar, as well as other recognisable figures. I just love her writing. Like I said, I've read her other 3 novels and they've all been like 4.5, 5-star reads for me that I would happily reread. I have in fact already reread 2 of them. So yeah, again, no real excuse for having not gotten to this one. It has got like lower reviews than her other books, but I am still very interested in giving it a go. The next one is The Rehearsal by Eleanor Catton. I'm going a bit rogue here because I've read Burn and Wood and loved it, so I think most people would tell me I should pick up The Luminaries. But I'm not massively inspired by the premise of The Luminaries. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's focused around a group of men sitting in a room having a big conversation, and it's linked to astrology. I don't know, the idea of a book about a group of men having a chat kind of bores me, but I think this one sounds a lot more up my street. Weirdly, the blurb is on the inside of the book, which is kind of odd for a paperback. It says, a high school sex scandal jolts a group of teenage girls into a new awareness of their potency. The sudden publicity seems to turn every act into a performance and every space into a stage. But when the local drama college decides to turn the scandal into a show, the real world and the world of the theatre are forced to meet, and soon the boundaries between private and public begin to dissolve. I'm even more excited, I've kind of forgotten what this one was about, but I remember reading the first couple of pages of this, and it's from the perspective of a saxophone teacher, and I didn't love it. And that's kind of put me off. I think it's really unfair to judge a book on 2 pages, but that is what I've done, so I haven't read it yet. Have you read this one? Would you recommend it? Then we have a few newer releases that I picked up around the time they came out. This is Landscapes by Christine Lee. Embarrassing that I haven't read this one. Actually, this should probably have been mentioned before some of the others, because I think I picked this up around the time this came out, which I think was late summer, early autumn last year. I paid quite a lot for it because it's published by $2 Radio in the US, and they are a small indie press, and I had to get it shipped here. And I still haven't read it, which is obviously ridiculous. Now, the reason I'm so excited about this is because this is an English country house novel set in a dystopian future, written by a writer of colour, told from the perspective of a woman who's struggling with these men in this environment. And I love English country house stories, but they are always historical and they are always written by white people. So I love that we're getting that kind of story in a whole other context, and I think this could be really interesting. I think the reason I haven't picked this up is because when I opened it, it's kind of written like a journal. And I think it does say on the back that this is supposed to be like part of a journal. And it is this woman cataloguing what she finds in the house. So she'll write the day, and then she'll write something about that day, and then she'll write like photographs, and she'll give a description of the photographs. So I think what I'm realising as I go through this is that sometimes books that are in a slightly different format put me off. And make me feel like I need to be a bit more intelligent to give them a read. So yeah, another reason I haven't read this one, although I feel like I could also love it. And whenever I read the blurb, I'm like, why haven't you read this one yet? The next one, also ridiculous, I haven't read, and that is A Flat Place by Noreen Masood. I picked this up, and then a couple of months later it was longlisted, and then was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Nonfiction. And I was like, well, I already thought it was going to be good, and now, like, you know, everyone else is saying it's amazing, still haven't read it. Have no excuse. Pretty much haven't been very good at reading memoirs this year, which is very frustrating because it was one of my aims for this year. But I love the sound of this. This is about a young woman who grows up in Lahore in Pakistan, and then sort of moves all over the world. But in this book, she talks about her childhood trauma as linked to flat places. So she comes to the Fens near where I live, which is a very flat place, and she talks about how these different flat landscapes around the world help her deal with her trauma. I love nature writing, and I'm always up for more nature writing by a woman of colour, because it is a field incredibly dominated by white middle class men. So really want to give this one a read. Although I have heard kind of mixed reviews, but some of the more negative reviews I've heard, the things people have said about it haven't put me off. So yeah, still excited for this one. Then I think this will be the next book I read, in part because my mum has been waiting to read this since I bought it. And pretty much every time she sees me, she says, have you read The Circle yet? And I'm like, no. And I'm one of those people who doesn't like to lend a book out. I lend loads of my books out, but I don't like to lend a book out if I haven't read it yet, because I'm petty. So yeah, that is The Circle by Katharina Vermette. This is the 3rd book in a kind of loosely connected trilogy that my mum and I have been reading, and it cost me £40, which is at least double what you usually pay for a new release hardback in the UK. I got it shipped from Canada because it's only been published there. And yeah, I've had it for a few months and haven't read it, which is ridiculous because it's the most I've ever paid for a book. And I know I'm going to love it. I think I'm kind of fearful because I built it up so much in my head. I'm now worried that like I won't love it as much as I thought, and that's making me like a little bit scared. And then mainly I've just had too many library books out that need to be returned. So I've really been ignoring my own books this year, which I'm not happy about. So yeah, this is going to be the next book I pick up. It's not even that long, it's under 300 pages. So then when I see my mum next week, she can borrow it and read it and we can chat about it. Then these next 3 I just spoke about in my summer TBR. So I'm literally just going to show you the title and the book. And then I'll link my summer TBR above so you can go and find out more about it. I was recently sent this one, probably only about a month ago, from the publisher, who are Dead Ink. And this is Lost in the Garden by Adam S. Leslie. I love this cover. I don't ever really wear pink, but I really love this kind of like vibrant pink. There's someone who lives near me who has a really bright pink front door, kind of this colour, and it's like my favourite door. I love it. Anyway, love this cover, and I love how they publish a lot of their paperbacks in this kind of matte, almost, what's the word? They've used like some sort of filter on it that makes it look a little bit dulled. I don't know, I'm not really good at discussing this type of thing, but yeah, love this. Sounds like a great summer read. And then we have Between Two Moons by Aisha Abdul Gawad. I had not heard of this book at all, and then it got longlisted for, let me get this title right, pretty sure it's called the Carol Shields Prize, which is a Canadian sort of equivalent of the Women's Prize, but I'm pretty sure they also include, which I think the Women's Prize should, non-binary writers. And there's quite a few books that made that long list that I thought sounded amazing, and I really want to read them, and this is the one I was super excited about. This is a family drama, and I also love this cover. It's a really weighty paperback. They've used like really high quality paper, so it just feels really nice to hold. So I'm hoping to read this very soon and love it. Then we have Some Strange Music Draws Me In by Griffin Hansberry. One of my patrons recommended this to me. I immediately loved the title, and I went and looked into it and thought it sounded like a sort of book I could absolutely love. Sort of two timelines, a coming of age timeline, then someone having to go back to the small town they grew up in and sort of revisiting that as a trans person and coming back to this town almost unrecognisable to the people who once knew them. So yeah, it sounds really interesting and like a book I could really love. Then another one, which is a book from an author who I've read another book by and really loved, is Salt Houses by Hala El-Yan. And I've been a bit resistant to pick this up because I read The Arsonist City by this author a couple of years ago, adored it, but didn't really love this UK edition of the book. I just think the cover is a bit kind of trite, and also I don't think this kind of shiny texture really works with this picture on the cover. So I was trying to kind of wait it out and buy a second-hand copy with a nicer cover. But then in the end I was like, this is silly because I really want to read this book. So I picked myself up a copy. This is a family drama, which The Arsonist City was, and it was absolutely amazing. So yeah, I think this one will be too. And then we have 3 memoirs that I bought myself for my birthday in May. So I haven't had these ones for very long at all. We have Negative Space by Lily Danziger. This is a memoir about her relationship with her father, who died when she was quite young, and a lot of people assumed he died of a drug overdose. And yeah, it's about a complex relationship with him, who was an artist, and she starts to look through his art, look through his art journals and scrapbooks to try and find out more about the man he was. And through doing that, she realises a lot of things about herself. I want to get her new book, which is a collection of essays about friendship between girls, which sounds amazing. But I told myself I wasn't allowed to get that until I'd read one of her older books. So here we are. And I read the first chapter of this when I arrived and thought it was absolutely brilliantly written. So I think I could absolutely love it. All 3 of these I feel like I could end up giving 5 stars. Pretty Baby by Chris Belcher. As soon as I saw the title of this book, I just wanted it. This is another memoir about a queer woman who was a sex worker, and she was branded as LA's renowned lesbian dominatrix, and then she became a renowned academic in the topic of sex work. And yeah, it's about her life navigating being a queer woman who predominantly, I think, worked with men as a dominatrix. And the opening scene is a very powerful one, and I was immediately compelled to continue. I didn't because I have too many books, but yeah, obviously really want to read this very soon. And then lastly, we have another beautiful pink book, and that is The Shape of Sound by Fiona Murphy. This is an Australian book published by Text Publishing. They're a indie press. Are they an indie press? They're a publisher, at least, in Australia. And they publish these really big format floppy books, which I love. And this sounds brilliant, and it hasn't got many reviews, but the reviews it has got really positive. I read a Kindle sample of this and loved the writing style, so wanted to give it a go. It is about the fact that Fiona Murphy managed to hide that she was either deaf or hard of hearing for 25 years because it was something she was really ashamed of. And it's about her as an adult coming to terms with her identity and getting to know more about deaf culture. And yeah, it says a compelling exploration of sound, silence and the self. Memoir about the corrosive power of secrets and how deaf experiences and disability are shaped by economics, politics, medicine and social expectations. And I just think that sounds absolutely fascinating, and I can't wait to dive into this one. So those are all the books I have unread on my shelves. I think I mentioned earlier that I tend to a lot of the books I have on my bookshelves are either books from authors I've read and enjoyed before, so I'm more confident I'm going to love them, and that's why I buy them rather than borrow them from the library. And then you'll notice a lot of these are either from small independent publishers, or they're just books that weren't super popular, so my library won't have copies of. So the only way I can read them is to buy them. And so yeah, it's really exciting because I feel like my own TBR is a bit more niche than the books I would pick up from the library, but I need to actually read them. So I would love to know how many of these you've read, what your thoughts were on them, if you would recommend them or not. And I would also love to know what size your TBR is. I'm so nosy, I love knowing everything about people's like bookish lives. So yeah, what size your TBR is, how many books you're comfortable with having, do you use the library? If you do you read a lot of front list? I think I've become someone who reads a lot of front list, and that's something sometimes I think isn't the best thing, but I can't seem to stop myself. So yeah, I would love to know all these things, and let's have a chat down below about TBRs and sort of, reading plans, reading habits. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.